So the Kavanah, the Kabbalistic Kavanah, that the important part of being here is that we are creating community by loving each other as ourselves, and that gives us permission to pray together. And whether we're here or whether we're on screen, wherever we are, we're here. We're doing this together as a community. So let's read actually 159, sorry. Let's read the English. It says stand here, so we can say we sit here instead of stand here. For the sake of the union of the Blessed Holy One with the Shekhinah, I sit here ready in body and mind to take upon myself the mitzvah. You shall love your fellow human being as yourself, and by this merit may I open up my mouth. Continue on page 160. Actually, 162. Yeah, starts on page 162. And the one thing with this machzor, if you've never used it before, I think everybody here has, I don't know if everybody online has, is that there's lots of great commentary, which is wonderful on the one hand, and the other hand, it makes it very heavy. And also sometimes the page breaks are strict. But the commentaries are quite wonderful if you don't feel like praying the words of the machzor. You can always read the commentaries. So we start with the morning blessings at the top of 162. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'olamim ma'abir she'ena me'enai numa me'afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'olamim hanoten l'sef b'bina l'havkin b'yom u'v'layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'olamim rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim bokeh ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim zokeh kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim hametim mitzadei daver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim she'asa kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim ozer Yisrael b'kura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim she'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim she'asani ben porim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'haolamim hanoten laya'ef ko'ah. Then let's read together on page 169, the blessing for the body, followed immediately by Elohen Shema, the blessing of the soul on page 172. Blessed are you, the architect, our God, the sovereign of all worlds, who shaped the human being with wisdom, making for us all the openings and vessels of the body. It is revealed and known before your throne of glory that if one of these passageways should be open when it should be closed, or blocked up when it should be free, one could not stay alive or stand before you. Blessed are you, miraculous, wondrous healer of all flesh. Continue at the top of 172. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. 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 194 for Sukkot Zimra, the verses of praise. Let's read the alternative version in English beneath the line. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world became. Blessed is the one. Blessed is the one who in the beginning gave birth. Blessed is the one who says and performs. Blessed is the one who declares and fulfills. Blessed is the one whose womb covers the earth. Blessed is the one whose womb protects all creatures. Blessed is the one who nourishes those who are in awe of her. Blessed is the one who lives forever and exists eternally. Blessed is the one who redeems and saves. Blessed is God's name. Continue on page 198, 197, 198. Silently. יפית חיי העולמים, מלך משובח ומפואר על יד שמו הגדול. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל, ותשבח כבוד. Page 202. Would somebody like to read for us underneath the line on 202? Somebody here or online? Jen?
Nature is God's nigun, a wordless melody of unfolding life. To awaken to God, we must hear the nigun. To awaken to God, we must listen in deep silence. Silence arises when thinking ceases. If we would know God, we must quiet the mind, cease the chatter that passes for knowledge, and in fact, it only flatters the foolish. We cannot live without words, but let us not imagine that words are sufficient. As a symphony needs rest to lift music out of noise, so we need silence to lift truth out of words.
Actually, we're going to move ahead to 246. Page 246. Esaenai. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the unseen one, the maker of the heavens and the earth. Esaenai el harim me'ayin yavo esri. Esaenai el harim me'ayin yavo esri. Esri me'im Adonai, Ose Shamayim Ba'aretz. Esri me'im Adonai, Ose Shamayim Ba'aretz. Yalai lai lai lai, yalai lai lai lai, yalai lai 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 lai. Yalai lai lai lai, yalai lai lai lai, yalai lai 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 lai. Yalai lai lai lai, yalai 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 lai, yalai lai, yalai into page 262 for the final psalm of all the psalms, where we praise God with all of our instruments, and the instruments can be, there's a litany of instruments here, but also the instruments are the instruments that we carry within us wherever we go, our body, our voices, our spirit. So we continue on 262. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. hallelujah, kerov kulo. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, b'teka shofar. Hallelujah, b'neva b'chinor. Hallelujah, b'tofu machol. Hallelujah, b'minim b'gugav. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, b'tziltzalei shama. Hallelujah, b'tziltzalei truah. Kol hanshamat hallelujah. Kol hanshamat hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanshamat hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanshamat hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Continue on page 264. The soul of every living thing shall bless your name. Nishmat kol chai, tivarech et shimcha, Adonai Eloheinu. Ruach HaKodesh. Continue on to 266. Through 268, 267. Na'alecha u'nishbechacha u'nefa'erecha u'nevarech et shem kodshecha k'amur leDavid. Archi nafshi et Adonai v'chol kravai et shem kodsho. Ha'el v'ta'atzumot uzecha hagadol v'kvod shemecha. Hagibor lanetzach v'hanara v'torach b'noratecha. So 270, normally that would continue right into Hamelach, but on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the melody changes and Hamelach is accentuated, it's focused on, again, this idea of Melech, of king, of ruler, which is, as I think I've talked about in past years, it's still an image that I struggle with. I think a lot of us do. Whether it's Melech or Malkah, whether it's a king or a queen, this idea of the metaphor of God as a sovereign on the throne, judging us, watching over us, which is so much a part of all of this liturgy for the Yamim Noraim. I don't know if anybody here has any particular thoughts about how they connect with that image, because we find it all over the place. We have Hamelach here, then we have Avinu Malkeinu later, and Melech, all over the place. Any thoughts here or online how you would relate to that particular metaphor?
Verse on 269 at the top, under in the commentaries. When we are brushed by the magic of the world's splendor, when we catch a hint of the mysteries of the universe, when we behold nature in all its wild beauty, we are embraced by a majesty that both takes our breath away and restores it to us in an inspiring rush. At that moment, the lofty and exalted throne shines before us. Earth, we're humble and joyful. that interrelatedness to nature
Mhm.
can sometimes be the majesty that you're talking about
Yeah,
for me.
It's the We Are Stardust version.
Yeah,
And there's that poem in the Shabbat book that's, when man was a servant, he wanted a master, and God was a master. That poem, do you know what I'm talking about? And
Yeah.
then when I am a woman, and, oh,
right,
yeah.
right.
but those words are too small for me now.
Right.
Yes, those words are too small for me, that's it.
Yeah, it's something bigger than all of that.
Yeah, like we've expanded past it.
I mean, if we look at Melech, instead of Melech or Malka, king or queen, look at Malchut, which is sovereignty, or what's another word in here, majesty maybe even, but it's really sovereignty. But it's this idea also that Malchut, in the Kabbalistic image of the world, the Sfirot, the 10 emanations of the divine, the lowest one is Malchut, which is also the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence, which becomes also the feminine presence of God. That's what we can connect to. Like there are all these other upper levels of God, but the one that we can,
This one's reachable.
that's reachable with work for us is Malchut, so that sovereignty. Jenny?
There's an upper and a lower when you have a supreme sovereign. But I don't think it's a bad thing to feel as a subordinate. And that's the word I keep coming with. We're subordinate, where nature is grander than us. There is something grander, and we put too much emphasis, I think, on ourselves in this world, not realizing that we're subordinate to other powers that we have no control over.
So being subordinate, again, realizing that there is some kind of a higher power, that's sort of the imagery also of the prostration during the Aleinu, reminding ourselves that we are, not that we are low or we are but dust, we are not worthy, but that we are subordinate. But even like when I think of that word subordinate, which interestingly, that came up recently at work about, I don't think of people at work as my subordinates. That's not the image that I use. Because I see it more as a partnership, but I think also, subordinate also infers an interdependence. Like I'm thinking of, I'm not a grammarian, but the idea of a subordinate clause. There's the two clauses, right? They're dependent on one another. So yes, there is a hierarchy in a way. The divine, and then the rest of the world, but we are dependent upon one another. That idea of, does God need us or do we need God? Yes. Whatever that means as a reconstructionist, I'm still not sure. But I'm thinking of Abraham Joshua Heschel's two central books, God in Search of Man, and Man's Quest for God. Again, gender aside, but those are the titles, so I'm not going to change them. That is, is there divinity without our need for it? Do we create this God? Are we created in God's image, or have we created God in our image? That's sort of what, to me, Midrash is all about, creating God in our image. Now, for some, that would seem heretical. I don't think so much in this crowd. Yes?
Joey was saying that it's a metaphor many have needed or still need, but I don't need to think on it, so doesn't resonate with him particularly.
And I think that's, so it's not a metaphor that resonates for everyone.
Yeah.
And yet it's a metaphor that we sort of get slapped in the face. Well, that's a terrible image, I'm sorry.
Presented with.
That's all over the place over the Yamim Noraim. So as we read those words, then, to find, I'm about to chant, Hamelach Yoshev al Kisei Ram V'Nisa, God who sits on high on the throne. Okay, so figure out how can you take those words and find a metaphor that does work. We're talking in this reading that commentary that Rachel brought up. I always get you two mixed up.
Half a brain. Yeah, same thing.
Two halves of the same coin, two sides of the same coin. Yeah. But that the world, the connection to nature, and I love the fact that you brought in a little I always want to say Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, but it really is
Crosby.
Joni Mitchell, We Are Stardust.
Yeah.
And
Joanne and Aaron were also pointing out the Kavanah that's right below it on the same page. This Kavanah on the page also refers to inner sovereigns, which is particularly helpful to me. So that
the inner sovereign. Okay, so that
I
which
cannot
is
hear well, so if you're gonna say anything, say it clearly.
Okay, I'll try.
okay. So yeah.
Go ahead, Harold. Go ahead, Harold.
I just wanted to see if you could hear me now, because before the service started, I was saying Lashana Tova and Good Yontif to everyone, and nobody responded, so I thought you couldn't hear me.
No, I
We
think
couldn't do that.
Now we can hear you.
now we can hear you. Sorry.
Lashana Tova.
You know, the interesting thing about the relationship, you know, we could continue on and on. And one thing like I said to Liz, and I think this is how this is my 4th year leading services here at Second Day, I think.
At least 4.
And it's
No,
like,
it's
I
more
think,
than, it's actually more than
I
that.
can never remember what I talked about the year before, but I figure if I can't remember, nobody else can either, so we're okay. But, this idea about our relationship with the divine and the images of that, like, there's, in one of the prayers, and now I'm just drawing a blank. The word earth is referred to Hadam Raglav. Earth is God's footstool. So this, again, we have this image of God on the throne, and yet, we're God's footstool. And what does that mean? Okay, but a footstool is necessary. It's not necessarily. I would love, because I'd rather see the earth's, described as God's chair. But again, that there is that relationship. So I think that, that whatever kind, whether it's a hierarchical relationship of the divine being to us, or if it's a hierarchical or a greater power that's within each one of us, however we choose to somehow understand that term Melech, or struggle with it. Maybe it's rejecting it, so we have to find our own image. But that all being said, we will continue on page 270 with Amal. Hamelech Yoshev al Kisei Ram V'Nisa Shochein ad Marom Kadosh Shemo V'Chatu Rananu Tzadikim V'Adonai L'Sharim Nava Tehillah V'Fi Sharim Titromam U'Vdivrei Tzadikim Titbarach U'Vilshon Chasidim Titkadash U'Vkerev Kedoshim Tithalal. Page 274. U'Machalot Revavot Amcha Beit Yisrael. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol V'HaKadosh B'Shamayim HaGadol V'HaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ha'aretz Ki Lechana Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avotenu V'Imotenu Shir Shvata Halel Zimraha Ozu Memshala Netzach Gedulah U'Gevura Tehillah V'Tiferet Kedusha U'Malchut Brachot v'hoda'ot me'ata v'yad olam Baruch atah Adonai El melech adovat tishbachot El ha'hoda'ot Adon ha'nifla'ot Ha'boker b'shrei zimra Melech elchei ha'olamim. Continue on page 276. Well, with everybody who's online, we definitely have. So we rise, if you are able to, on page 276 for Chatzi Kaddish, and then we'll continue with Baruch Hu on page 278. Yitkadal Yikadash Shemei Rabbah, Ve'almad Yivrach Yirteh V'yam Nitwach Yuteh, V'chayet Kon V'yam Echon V'chayet Kol Beit Yisrael, Haskalah Bisman Karev Imru Amen. Yehesh Merabah Mevorach Le'olam U'Maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbarach v'mam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitala v'yitala shemei kudsha b'richu le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata v'shpagata v'nechamata d'amiran v'yama v'imru amen. Continue on to page 277 with As We Bless the Source of Life, and then into Baruch Hu on page 278. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. And the blessing gives us strength and makes our vision clear. And the blessing gives us peace and the courage to dare. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. May be seated. Continue on page 280. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uborei choshech, oseh shalom uborei hakol, or olam yotzer chaim, orot me'afel, amar vayehi. Continue on page 296. Et Shem HaMelech HaGadol HaGibor VaHanorah Kadosh V'Mekablim Alehem O Malchut Shamayim Zeh B'Zeh V'Notnim B'Ahava Reshut Zeh Lazel Hatish Liotram V'Nachad Ruach V'Safa Berura V'Nimat Kedusha Kulam Ke'echad Onim V'Yomrim V'Yirah Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzvaot Olavo haaretz kevado, va'ofanim v'chayot lekodesh, v'rash gadol b'nasim limat serafim, limatam meshachtim diomrim, Baruch kavod Adonai v'imkomo. We turn to page 298. Would somebody like to read beneath the line on 298? Jane?
Every day, creation is renewed. Wake up and see unfolding in the spreading light of dawn, the world and all it contains. Coming into being, new, fresh, filled with divine goodness and love. Every day, creation is renewed, reflected in the great lights we see a new day, one precious day, eternity.
Or Chadash al Zion Tahir, v'nizkehu lanu b'mheira le'oro. Or Chadash al Zion Tahir, v'nizkehu lanu b'mheira le'oro. Or Chadash al Zion Tahir, v'nizkehu B'mheira le'oro, or Chadash al Zion Tahir, v'nizkehu lanu, b'mheira le'oro. Baruch atah continue on page 300 with Ahava Rabbah, singing of our love for God, followed by Shema Yahavta, which God's love for us. Again, that exchange of love between human beings is how we experience the exchange of love between us and the divine. We'll just chant the first words of Ahava Rabbah as we used Shepherd will chant for that. Ahava Rabbah, Ahavtanu, 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 Ahava Rabbah, Ahavtanu. Continue on page 304 with Shema Yahavta. Harold, would you like to lead us? I know you like to lead the Shema.
Still muted, hang on. Just make sure he hasn't walked away from the computer, because that happens.
Okay.
Okay, just unmuted. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed, V'hafta et Adonai Elohecha, V'kol levavacha, Uv'shkol nafshecha, Uv'kol meodecha, V'chayei hadvarim ha'ela asher amelchi mitzvahcha hayom al levavacha, V'shenantam levenacha v'debarta bam, V'shivtacha v'vesecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shobecha uv'komecha ukeshartam leos al yedecha v'chayu letotafos bein einecha uvhavtim al mezuzot beitecha uv'shirecha.
Thank you. Continue silently. Choose either the first biblical selection on 306 or the second on 310, and then continue silently on 312. Adonai Elohechem Emet. So we'll continue on 318. Hilo Leil Elyon Baruch Hu Barach Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael l'chanu shira v'simcha rabba v'yamru kulam V'chamocha ba'elim Adonai V'chamocha nedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot oseh melech Shira chadasha shibuchu kulim l'shimcha asfat hayam Yachad kulam hodovim l'chu v'yamru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Please rise if you are able for Tzur Yisrael, 318. Tzur Yisrael, kumade Ezras Yisrael, uvdechinu mecha, Yuda Yisrael, go aleinu, Adonai Zvaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Ka'al Yisrael. Would somebody like to read either one of the preludes to the Amidah in 319? Somebody like to read that?
And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and the mind of man, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things.
Thank you. So for the beginning of the Amidah, the ark is open. Would somebody like that honor to open the ark? On page 322. Ochila la'el achalef adav eshalem imenu me'ana lashon asher v'kalim yasira zo ara'im rananot ba'ad nefalav Yihi l'ratzonim refi v'yol libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri v'go'ali Continue on page 324. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor HaNorah, Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'Kohonei HaKol, V'Zoher Chasei Achot Imot, U'Mehi Gula L'Pneihem, Leman Shemo V'Yahava Misot Hachamim U'Nevonim U'Milemed Da'at Me'Menim Echatri B'Tfila V'Tachanunim L'Chalot U'Chanem Pnei Melech Maltei Amlachim Ba'Adonai Adonim Page 328 Zovrenu lechaim, melech ha'afetz ba'afayim, v'chafenu b'sefer ha'chaim, leman Elohim chaim, melech ozer u'mashiach magen, kahal, mechakel chaim b'chesed, mechayek kol chaim rachamim rabim, somet noflim v'rofeh cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato v'shenei afar, michamocham malach urot umidomecha, melech meimit umekayem umatmiach Yeshua. So we continue now, continue silently until page 345. So we'll continue on page 346 with the interpretive version of the Unetana Tokef. Would somebody like to lead that responsibly? Page 346. Okay. How much time did we waste in the year that is now gone? Was there love inside our home, or was the affection or affectionate word left unsaid? Were we a help to our mates, or did we take them for granted?
How was it with our friends? Were we there when we needed us or not?
The kind deed, did we perform it or postpone it? The unnecessary jibe, did we say it or hold it back?
Did we live by false values? Did we deceive others? Did we deceive ourselves?
Were we sensitive to the rights and feelings of those who work for us?
Did we acquire only possessions? But did we acquire new insights that
Did we fear what the crowd would say and keep quiet when we should have spoken out?
Did we mind only our own business, or did we feel the heartbreak of others?
Did we live right? And if not, then have we learned and will we change? Continue on the top of page 348 with the Matana Toga. Unitane tokef kedushat hayom ki unora ve'ayom uvot yinasem malchutecha v'chom chesed kisecha v'teshev alav be'emet emet ki ata hu dayan ומוכיח ביודע בעת, וחותם וסופר ומונע, ותזכור כל הנשכחות, ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ומעליו יקרא וחותם יד כל אדם בו. ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וכל מעמדך יישמע, ומלאכים יחפצון, וחיל רדה יחפצון, ויאמרו, הנה יום הדין, לפקוד על צבא מרום בדין, כי לא יזכו בעיניך הדין. Continue in English at the top paragraph on 349. And all who come into the world pass before you like sheep for the shepherd, for just as the shepherd numbers the flock, passing the herd by the staff, so do you make us pass before you, and number and count, determine the life, one by one, all who have life breath within. You decide for each creature the cycles of life, and write down its destined decree. Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, u'biyom tzom kippur yekatevun. Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, u'biyom tzom kippur yekatevun. Kama yaprum v'chama yibarehun, mi yeh u'mi yamut, mi v'kitzot u'mi lo v'kitzot, mi v'esh u'mi v'mayim. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, u'biyom tzom kippur yekatevun. Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, u'biyom tzom kippur yekatevun. Mi v'cherev u'mi v'chaya, mi v'rav u'mi v'tzama, mi v'ra'ach u'mi v'magipa, mi v'chanika u'mi v'skira, mi yanuach u'mi yanuach, mi yishakek u'mi yitorev. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, u'biyom tzom kippur yekatevun. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, u'biyom tzom kippur yekatevun. Mi shalev u'mi yitjaser, mi ani u'mi ashir, mi yishafel u'mi yarum. U'tshuva u'tfila u'tzedakah, ma'avirin et ro'ah ha'gezerah. may be seated. So all of those images, we were talking before about the power of metaphor and how do we deal with metaphors that might be problematic for us today, or imagery that we find problematic, the idea of passing before God like sheep and being judged, and who shall live and who shall die, and how will our next year be? Any thoughts before we continue about how do you, again, this is one of the central tefillot of our liturgy. Susan?
I always like that it's not specific. I like when things are, you can assess something specifically, like an example, or just, it helps a lot to understand something and to create a different version of ourselves. We really ask ourselves these specific questions, how to improve next year.
So the importance of really asking ourselves the questions, even if we don't view it literally, that we have to ask ourselves the questions about how we're going to live the next year. How are we living our lives right now, and what are the possible consequences? Because let's face it, however we live our lives, there are always consequences for actions. And so, we do, sort of determine for ourselves, or we start the process of determining for ourselves what's the next year going to be. Of course, we don't always know what the consequences are going to be, and we think they're going to be one thing and they're going to be another, but at least we try our best. Any other thoughts about the imagery?
Joanne and Aaron had commented, I've been reading a lot of the commentaries with this question of king in mind, and it is addressed in various ways. I'm landing on the idea of humility as something I can connect to and find helpful.
Humility.
I can't hear you with them.
I'm sorry, I'm trying.
Yeah, but maybe when you do, also to take,
Yeah,
I
maybe
now
take
have
your
my
mask
big-
off.
Take
Yeah.
your mask off when.
No, I'm not gonna.
Okay, sorry.
Joanne and Aaron had said, I've been reading the commentaries with this question of king in mind, and it is addressed in various ways. I'm landing on the idea of humility as something I can connect to and find helpful.
Yeah, that's all. So the idea of humility, all of the imagery of king and ruler that we were talking about before, and even this too, that there is some greater power determining, how the year is going to be, that it's helped us to be humble, to realize that there is some kind of power greater than ourselves. Any other thoughts?
I'm just wondering how we could rewrite this in terms of what would be meaningful to us.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying who dies by sword, and who by beast, and who by earthquake and plague, and strangled and stoned. These just aren't the ways today that we suffer. There are other ways that, other things that we contend with. So it would be interesting, since there's so much thought that goes into the writings in here, if someone has written, a more current, liturgy.
Yeah. I mean, there is, if we scoot back to page 345, there is another interpretive version, which actually goes, this version has been around for a long time. And I don't know, let's read, I chose the other interpretive version this time, but let's read that one and see if I'm curious to hear people's responses to that. Would somebody like to lead us in the responsive reading on 345? Okay.
When we really begin a new year, it is decided, and when we actually repent, it is determined.
Who shall be truly alive, and who shall merely exist? Who shall be happy, and who miserable?
Who shall be tormented by the fire of ambition, and whose hope shall be quenched by the waters of failure?
Who shall be pierced by the sharp sword of envy, and who shall be torn by the wild beast of resentment?
Who shall hunger for companionship, and who shall thirst for approval?
Who shall be shattered by storms of change, and who shall be plagued by the pressures of conformity?
Who shall be strangled by insecurity, and who shall be beaten into submission?
Who shall be content with their lot, and who shall wander in search of satisfaction?
Who shall be serene, and who shall be distraught?
Who shall be at ease, and who shall be afflicted with anxiety?
Who shall be poor in their own eyes, and who shall be rich in tranquility?
But Teshuvah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah have the power to change the character of our lives.
We resolve then to turn from our accustomed ways and to behave righteously, so that we may truly begin a new year.
So as I said, this particular reading or versions of it have been around a long time. But what else would we, what else would people, are there things that you can think of right now that people would want to add? I mean, these are all different sort of metaphors, but also, I don't know, Danny, is there anything particular that you were thinking of? But also thinking of the violence in our world today. The violence in our country, the violence in other countries, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Iran, what's happening, again, on our own streets, in our own cities and towns. The rise of anti-Semitism in the world,
Joey had commented, afflicted with anxiety, what about those who have PTSD, other anxiety disorders? And I commented, I knew we'd be thinking the same thing, Joey.
Yeah, it's not just anxiety.
There's the trauma of some people that, is it written? Is it not? Was it predestined? Just happened? Is that written in? That some of us will be?
That some of us will be, what was the last part?
For lack of a better word, broken.
Broken. So how do we deal with brokenness? It's easy to say, oh, well, if we do this X, Y, and Z, Teshuvah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah, or whatever it is, if we do therapy, meditation, and mindfulness, whatever, then we can avert the severity. But, well, it's interesting because thinking about this, it's not saying, often the translation is, will avert the severe decree, but it's actually avert the severity of the decree. So this idea that the anxiety, the PTSD, the brokenness that comes from trauma can still be there and may always be there. And often is for people who go through trauma, who are survivors of various traumas. But what can we do in our lives? How do we use spiritual practice? How do we use community? How do we use the various resources available to us to lessen the severity? It's not saying that it's going to go away.
Joanne Contat said there's this.
Yeah, exactly. Use the mic and just talk slowly.
There is a statement that yeshiva, tefillah, is it
Teshuvah,
Teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah have the power to change the character of our lives, which is what you're saying.
Right.
It's not just that you start at one place, it's did you finish somewhere else?
It changes the character, it doesn't necessarily make everything better. So, yeah, Janet?
But even within all of that, there has to be relationship. I mean, and that's the crux of everything in our lives is how we behave toward others. Are we healers? Are we naysayers? Are we there for others? Do we have compassion? So you can't do it all alone. You may pray and whatever. It has to take a form in this world. Your presence here and your presence can be felt for the good. Bring change.
So about relationship and community, right? We're not saying these prayers, technically you can say these prayers at home alone. But even the people who are home right now are not doing it alone. The people who are on Zoom, you could have the mop store in front of you, or any of us could, and doing this alone, but there's something about doing it in community. There's a wonderful analogy that was in a commentary about Teshuvah or selichot, asking for forgiveness. It was, I'm pretty sure it was Rav Joseph Soloveitchik, who talked about the idea of doing tshuva. I think I can't remember the exact source. I think he was referring more to Yom Kippur, because there's something that it says that just the existence, I know we're jumping ahead 10 days, but 9 days. The existence of Yom Kippur in and of itself helps to absolve us of our sins to a certain extent. But then it's also, how do we also then have to deal with our own stuff that we have to deal with. And we do that in a community, not just alone. And he likens it to a mikvah in a way, that we sort of immerse ourselves in the mikvah on Yom Kippur, but I think you could apply it to the whole 10 days. And when, I remember years ago writing a sermon about this, it might be I think it was before I had computers, so it's a long time ago. That, looking at the community as our mikvah, that we're immersing ourselves. When you immerse yourselves in the mikvah, if for whatever the reason is, but let's say for conversion purposes, but anytime when you immerse yourself in the mikvah, you go in one way and you come out in a different spiritual state. You're still the same person, but you're not. And so to somehow look at this whole process of teshuva this week, today through Yom Kippur, as sort of, the community is our mikvah. We're immersing ourselves, and then when we come out at the end of the 10 days, hopefully we've changed. But again, going back to sort of Joey's question, it doesn't mean everything's going to be, not everything's not going to be hunky-dory, fine, great, everything's perfect. But somehow we're able to seek forgiveness and to let go of things to some extent, so that we are changed in a way.
And the community is available as a mikvah for everyone all year.
Right, the community is available as a mikvah for everyone all year. That's a good plug.
Slide that in, just slide that in.
It's not just high holidays only. Yeah, Janet.
I think the word grace comes in here at some point. We think of God's grace.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from a mikvah, you don't forget all that trauma that you've had. But if you find grace within yourself, it's within yourself that you have to find this strength to accept and continue with all that you have to bring into your life, into your relationships, into your community. That grace is just such a very important word, and I seek it, and it's very elusive. It's just really elusive.
So how do you define grace?
That's tough. Everyone else can give this, because I'd like to know.
Anybody else? So it's interesting. So I'm thinking now, there are three terms that are used in the tradition. Where is it in the literature? The Chain, the Chesed, Hold on one second. So before I lose my train of thought. So there's Chain, Chesed, and Rachamim, which are also in the liturgy too. So Chain is translated as grace. Chesed is sort of overflowing love. And Rachamim is compassion, which comes from the same root as womb. So those three different concepts. Now, yes.
So can you define teshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah?
I define teshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah.
Returning, praying, and charity.
I mean, that's if you want it, but right, there are different translations and different understandings. Translation is always commentary. I remember that was, if I learned one thing in rabbinical school, hopefully I learned more than one thing, but if I learned one thing from David Golem, Allah Shalom, who was my biblical teacher, Hebrew teacher, biblical and rabbinic Hebrew, he said, translation is always commentary, translation is midrash. So we take, Teshuva, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. Teshuva is, yes, it's repentance, but it's also, we also have the term slichot, which is seeking forgiveness. But so it's more than just seeking forgiveness. So Teshuva is about returning, but what are we returning to? Are we returning to the way we were last year? Isn't that kind of what we're trying to get rid of? Well, yes, no, both. Yeah, it makes me think of teaching of Pema Chodron, who is one of my favorite teachers, is an American Buddhist nun. And she talks about going through mindfulness and all that, and meditation and all that. It's to say, oh, it's about making me a better person. You're automatically sort of casting aspersions on who you are now. Like, no, changing doesn't mean we're not. Hopefully, we're not bad now. It's sort of returning to where we should be, want to be. What are the things we want to let go of? What are the things we want to keep? And part of that process is doing slicha, the different, and even, we get into a whole other conversation, but we'll stick with this. There are even 3 different words for, which are used in the liturgy for forgiveness, for the slicha, mechila, and kapara. So, it's all such a complicated process. So teshuva is about returning in some way, shape, or form to our best selves, which doesn't mean that our current selves are bad. That's the tricky part. It's forgive me, I feel like, what is it? I am not worthy. What's that from?
Wayne's World. Wayne's World.
Wayne's World, that's right, okay. Okay, but we are worthy. Because if we weren't worthy, we wouldn't be going through the process to begin with.
I like the idea of returning to your essence.
To your essence?
To your essence, where we've wandered from ourselves, we're
Mhm.
returning back to what we really were in the beginning before the world got its hands on us.
Okay, before the world got its hands on it?
On us, yeah.
I still want grace.
Okay, so grace, so well, we've got teshuva, tefillah is, again, so if we're looking at, this is becoming our discussion / sermon for today. This wasn't my plan to do this now. Something else I was thinking about later. I was talking about doing this, but this is sort of taking on a life of its own. And that's one thing I say I love about this congregation. It's like we go with the flow. I think this is a really important discussion. So tefillah, prayer, also comes, lihitpalel, to pray, is a reflexive verb. So it's something that you do too with yourself. So it's an inner process, and yet it has outer pieces. So that's why we can do it on our own, but we also do it with others. And it has it does have an effect on us. So some kind of prayer, but I would say spiritual practice of any kind. If prayer is not your thing, meditation, if it's, going for a walk, if it's, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be, at least as far as I'm concerned, that you don't have to have this or a version of this with you. So teshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, again, we translate as charity, but it's righteousness, it's justice, it's doing good in the world, it's doing righteousness in the world, it's making things right. Charity is just one form of it, and yet it's something that we have to do, which is also what differs, the difference between, tzedakah, which is we're commanded to bring justice into the world, as opposed to charity, which comes from the word caritas, heart. It's what your heart moves you to do. Judaism Judaism is more like, well, your heart might not be moving you at this moment to do it, but you've got to do it anyway. And then, so then we've got the grace.
What's the Hebrew word, grace? Because
Same.
they always have roots. I mean, all the Hebrew words have roots from that from. So
Right,
what
and I'm
is
trying to
word
think
for
what the
grace?
word, what the root is. So we've got chen, which is seen as grace. It's something that comes to us without us necessarily deserving it or doing anything to,
That's right.
Christian grace especially is that way.
I kind of see grace in our interpretation as maybe God-given, but it's an internal power within ourselves to change, to do things, to, perfect ourselves. And it's not just boom, you got it,
Right. So it's something that comes from within us that enables us to do this work of teshuvah. And then we've got chesed, which is that, in the Kabbalistic sense, chesed is the overflowing love of God. It's something that, it literally overflows and comes to us. And again, sort of can become that mikveh that I talked about earlier. Rachamim being compassion, but also coming from the same root again as rechem, as womb. So it's this womb-like compassion. So it's somehow in a way, in a spiritual sense, almost returning to the womb. And that allows us to do this work of teshuvah. It all sort of blends together.
I was thinking of another pop culture reference since we added the Wayne's World earlier when we started the discussion about grace. There was a situation comedy some years ago called Grace Under Fire, which
Right.
basically the plot goes along with what you're saying.
Wait, what was the last
The
thing?
plot went along
A
with what you're saying.
trying to make her way in the world. Grace Under Fire.
Grace under fire. Yeah, that term. Yeah, sometimes I hate thinking of us being under fire, but I know what you're saying. That somehow it gives us the ability to continue even when we are under stress. When we have, whether we're under stress because of what's happening in our lives, or whether it's because of the trauma that we're carrying around with us, or that somehow that grace allows us to continue. And sometimes it's harder than others. But, I think this whole process that we're doing today and for these 10 days, hopefully enables us to continue to live, knowing that there is some kind of under fire for each of us at all times. There's pressure and tension that we're living under or carrying with us, and somehow to maintain that grace, and to use the compassion and the love that comes to us from the divine through others.
It's so easy when you're dealing with traumas or things that are difficult to think that you're alone in that experience. And one of the best parts about doing teshuvah in the community of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is that idea that you're not alone, that we're all come together and we're all facing different things, but it gives us examples of how everybody is facing those things, and we all come together and to try to be better for the next year.
Yeah, the community is such an essential part of it. So it makes you think of times before, pre-Zoom, electronic forms of connection or media at all. If people were if people couldn't get out of the house, or people lived elsewhere, not having that connection to community. Susan?
I was thinking of doing this and the discussion later, so it's
Wait, hold on 1 second. Could you
Yeah,
give Susan the mic? It's harder to hear all the way up here. So, and
Please check out, like, is it just a computer or?
there we go.
This was my idea for this afternoon, because I really liked this, and I wanted to discuss people's thoughts about how they would assess their year. But there's a lot to it. First, I wondered who Jack Schweimer is and who decides. We decide, I guess. I know we have to discuss here. You just write to me, like, I'll be writing to you.
So yeah, who decides and how we decide? I think everybody has their own way of understanding it. Oh, that's a good idea. Thanks everybody for moving the table closer. Yeah, good. Speaking of being in the community, so yeah, it's nice having you a little bit closer there, Susan. Great. I mean, the truth, there's so much more to think about here, and I'm just cognizant of time also. So this is a conversation to continue. But thank you everybody for, Marcia, did you have something?
Just a real quick comment, doesn't tzedakah also
tell us that we have to fix the world?
Yes. Yeah, it's our responsibility to do justice and to make the world a better place. Yes. It's not something, again, it's not just charity. It's not just something we do it if our heart, if our heart tells us to. It's sort of like the fake it till you make it type of philosophy. Like, okay, you might not feel like repairing the world right now, but we don't have a choice. We may not feel like giving to the poor. We may not feel like helping others, but you know what? Doesn't matter. We got to do it, and then hopefully, eventually, we'll feel it too. But if you wait until you feel it, it's not necessarily ever going to happen. So I think that's important.
But each
Yeah.
one of us can't repair everything. We have
No.
to do our little part to be able to make a difference.
Right? No, it never says we have to fix everything. We each do what we can, and we have to start with ourselves, but while also balancing with working with others too. So it's a balancing act. All right, so where were we? Oh, okay, we are in the middle of page 356. Please rise if you are able. Actually, the top of 356 with the Kedusha. Aseh leman shemecha v'kadesh shemcha, amati shemecha ba'avur kavod shemecha, ha'aratz v'hamikdash k'sod zi'atzar v'kodesh, amati shemcha b'kodesh, darei ma'ala u'darei mata, kakatuv haya v'v'yecha, v'karazeh el zeh v'yamar, kadosh, 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 Adonai tzvaot, melech kol haaretz kvodo. Kvodo malel mishatat shualim zel hazeh, ayeh mekom kvodo limatam baruch yomeru, baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo, mimkomo even barachamim v'yachanam hamyachadim shemo, ker b'boker b'chol yom tamid hamayim v'yahavat shema omrim, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Page 358. Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Hu Yashvienu, Baracham Mahasheni, Sheni B'yedei Kol Chai, Li'yot Lachem Le'elogim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adir Adireinu Adonai Eloheinu, Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol Ha'aretz, V'haya Adonai L'melcha Kol Ha'aretz, V'yom Ha'lui Adonai Echad, U'shemo Echad, U'direi Kodesh Katuv Lemor. Ilo Adonai Le'olam Elohim Tzidon, Ledor Vador, Hallelujah. Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Nagid Kod Lecha. Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, Nagid Kod Lecha. Ulenetzach nitzachim, Kedushatecha nakdish, Kedushatecha nakdish. V'shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamush le'olam va'ed. Ledor vador, Ledor vador, Ledor vador, nagid God lecha. Ledor vador, Ledor vador, Ledor vador, nagid God lecha. Ki hamelech gadol v'kadosh ata, gadol v'kadosh ata. Ki hamelech gadol v'kadosh ata, gadol v'kadosh ata. We continue silently, pages 364 to 382, where there are alternative Amidah readings on page 383 through 386. So use the words in your Machzor, the alternative readings, or simply the words in your heart. Take this time for silent prayer or meditation, and be seated when you've finished. Please feel free to continue with your silent prayer. We're just going to go back to page 380 and sing a prayer, our prayer for peace, as well as asking God to, again, the metaphor, to put us in the book of life. Take our time. Sim shalom tova u'bracha ha'olam. Sim shalom tova u'bracha. Ve'en b'chesed rachamim aleinu yal kol Yisrael amecha. Varfeinu avinu kulanu ke'echad yor panecha. shalom, tova uvracha ba'olam, sim shalom, tova uvracha. Kivor panecha natata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Torah chaim v'ahavat chesed, tzedakah uvracha, v'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom. Sim shalom, tova uvracha ba'olam, sim shalom, tova uvracha. B'tov me'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael, ve'et kol ha'amim b'rachos v'shalom. Sim shalom, tova uvracha ba'olam, sim shalom, tova uvracha. I'm trying to remember which melody for Sefer Chaim we use. Is there one particular one? I know a few different ones. Okay, I'll use the one that my go-to, which is the one I grew up with. Sefer Chaim beracha v'shalom u'parnasa tova nizacher v'nikatet lefanecha אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום ברוך אתה אדוני עושה שלום. Turn now to page 452. Would somebody like to open the ark, or the curtains to the ark? Okay. Please rise if you are able. And the image of Avinu Malkeinu, God is a sovereign, God is a parent, that strength within us and around us that helps us to make the world. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, ein lanu melech ela ata, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, aseh imanu leman shemecha, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova. Let's read together the English. Our Creator, our Sovereign, we have done wrong in your presence. Our Creator, our Sovereign, we have no one to rule over us but you. Our Creator, our Sovereign, help us for the honor of your name. Our Creator, our Sovereign, renew for us a good year. Our Creator, our Sovereign, nullify the plans of any who may seek to do us harm. Our Creator, our Sovereign, grant forgiveness and atonement for all our transgressions. Our Creator, our Sovereign, help us to return wholeheartedly into your presence. Our Creator, our Sovereign, send thorough healing to all those who ail. Our Creator, our Sovereign, inscribe us for a good fortune in the book of life. Our Creator, our Sovereign, inscribe us in the book of redemption and salvation. Our Creator, our Sovereign, inscribe us in the book of sustenance and livelihood. Our Creator, our Sovereign, inscribe us in the book of merit. Our Creator, our Sovereign, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness and atonement. Our Creator, our Sovereign, let us grow for us the tree of imminent redemption. Our Creator, our Sovereign, remember us though we are made of dust. Our Creator, our Sovereign, be merciful to us and to all our offspring. Our Creator, our Sovereign, act in memory of all those who have been killed while honoring your name. Our Creator, our Sovereign, act in honor of your great and mighty, awe-inspiring name, which has been called out over us for our protection. Our Creator, our Sovereign, be gracious with us and respond to us, for we have no deeds to justify us. Deal with us in righteousness and love, and save us now. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Aseh leman harukim al shem kodshecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Aseh leman shemecha, hagadol hagibor v'hanora, shenikra aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Konenu v'haneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Konenu v'haneinu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah And actually on page 456, Liz, I think this is the blessing you were talking about. Would you like to read it?
Oh, sure. When men were children, they thought of God as a father. When men were slaves, they thought of God as a master. When men were subjects, they thought of God as a king. But I am a woman, not a slave, not a subject, not a child who longs for God as father or mother. I might imagine God as teacher or friend, but those images, like king, master, father, or mother, are too small for me now. God is the force of motion and light in the universe. God is the strength of life on our planet. God is the power moving us to do good. God is the source of love springing up in us. God is far beyond what we can comprehend.
Thank you. So we continue now on page 462. Yitada ve'yitada shemei Rabba men ve'alma dibra hirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayedechol beit Yisrael v'agalah u'gizman kariv ve'himeru amen yehesh shmei Rabba mevara le'olam olam Yitzhara ve'yishtava v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam ve'yitzaseh ve'yitzadar ve'yitale ve'yitalal shemei l'kudsha richu le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbehata v'nechemata damigran v'alma v'imru amen. Titkabel to lo tahom uva'ut tahom de kol beit Yisrael Adam Avalon Divishmaya Ve'imru Amen. Yesh Rama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Yisrael Ve'al Yisrael Ve'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Ve'romav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Yisrael Ve'al Yoshvei Tevel Ve'imru Amen. All right. So the Torah service, it's on page 464. We do have enough people to do a Torah service. I think what we've done in past years is we've done the Torah service and we've just done one sort of group aliyah. Is that okay with everybody?
Whatever you like.
Well, if anybody for whatever reason wants a specific aliyah, otherwise we can just do everybody who would like to come up and do an aliyah together. All right, so we're going to continue on page 464. In Kamocha Elohim Adonai, in Kamasecha, Malchutecha Malchut, Kol Olamim Umemshaltecha, Bechol Dor Vador, Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Imloch Leolam Vaed, Adonai Oslamo Adonai Yevarech et Amo Vashalom Avarachamim Heitiv Avirtzonecha et Zion Tivneh Chomot Yerushalayim Tivneh Chomot Yerushalayim Ki Vecha Levad Vatachnu Melech Elam Venisa Adon Olamim. So I need somebody who's going to open the ark and someone who's going to carry the Torah. You two know each other? So, please rise as the ark is open on page 466. Vayivin so Aaron vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu hoirecha ve'anusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah Udvar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. Continue on the bottom of page 468. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Derech Haim, V'Rav Chesed V'Yemet, Noter Chesed La'alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakei, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Derech Haim, V'Rav Chesed V'Yemet, Noter Chesed La'alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata tefilati, lecha Adonai, et ratzon, Elohim berov chesdecha, aneni, be'emet yishecha. Which Torah?
With the breastplate,
With breastplate, thank you.
one that's all dressed up.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Eloheinu, Adonai, Kadosh Menorah Shema.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'Norah Shemo.
Adonai Titi, Adonai Shema V'Adam.
Adonai HaGeula, v'Hatiferet, v'Hanezach v'Hahod. Ki kol hashamayim u'ba'aretz, ki kol hashamayim u'ba'aretz. Adonai l'mamlecha, b'hamid na'aseh l'kol rosh. Romamu, Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ishtachachu, le'harav lav kadosh hu. Romamu, Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ishtachachu, le'harav kadosh hu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. All right, so let's be seated. All right, so let me just find this. It's not far from where we left off yesterday. So, like I said, we'll do one group Aliyah. So this week, yesterday we had the birth of Isaac, and today we have almost the death of Isaac. So, but luckily, as we know the story, Abraham did stop at the last minute by an angel calling from heaven. So it was God testing Abraham, God testing Isaac, Abraham testing God, depends how you want to look at it, all three. But, you know, it always seems like a strange thing in some ways to be reading. But I think what it reminds us is, if we're talking about the start, the creation of the Jewish people, that started with the birth of Isaac, and what it assured its continuation was the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. But, you know, talk about carrying around trauma. There's this amazing poem by Chaim Guri, great Israeli poet, may he rest in peace. talks about the Akedah, and basically, if I remember the binding of Isaac, I remember the closing line is that it's called Yerusha, which means heritage. And the heritage we have is that we are born with a knife in our heart, which is very powerful. And I've written a bunch of different midrashim about this. I'm not sure actually after we do the Aliyah, maybe I'll share just like a little bit of one that I've written from Sarah's perspective, since she sort of gets left out of the story. Whoever would like to come up for the Aliyah, the blessings for the Aliyah are on page 4, blessing for the Aliyah on page 476. Yamdu kol hakol kahal Aliyah. So all those who would like to, the blessings over there. Somebody has to, so your closest, so if you want to touch them, kiss the Torah right there. Baruch Adonai Hamerach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamerach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher nitanu le'avodato, v'natan לנו את תורתו. Baruch Adonai notei haTorah.
Amen. Vahi afar hadvarim ha'eleh v'ha'elohim nisa et Abraham vayomer elav Abraham vayomer hineni vayomer kafna et bincha et yichidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak v'lech lecha el eretz haMoriah V'alehu sham le'olah, v'alehu sham le'olah, alapad le'harim, asher amar Allah, v'yashkem Abraham b'boker, v'yachavosh et chamoro, v'yikach et shnei na'arav ito, ve'et Yitzchak b'no, v'yivaka atzei olah, v'yakom v'yelech, Vayakom vayelech el hamakom asher amar lo ha'elohim. Vayom hashlishi vayisha Abraham et einav. Vayar et hamakom merachot. Vayomer Abraham el na'arav. Shvu lachem ko im hachamor. Ve'et hanar necha ad ko. Vaynishtechatev neshuva alechem vayikach Abraham et atzei ha'olah vayasem el al Yitzchak beno vayikach biyado et ha'esh et ha'ma'apelet vayelchu shnehem yachdav vayomer Yitzchak el Abraham aviv vayomer avi, vayomer hineni, b'nei, vayomer hineni b'ni, vayomer hinei ha'esh, va'itzim, ayeh haseh le'olah, vayomer Abraham, Elohim yir'elo haseh le'olah, b'ni, vayelchu shnehem yachdav, vayavo ha'makom asher amar lo, Elohim vayiven sham Abraham et hamizbeach vayaroch et ha'etzim vayakod et Yitzchak beno vayasem oto al hamizbeach mima'al ha'etzim vayishlach Abraham et yado vayikach et hama'apelet lishchot et beno Vayikra alav malach Adonai min hashamayim. Vayomer Abraham, vayomer hineni. Vayomer al tishlach yadcha el hana'ar, v'al ta'aslo me'uma. Ki ata yadati, yir'eh Elohim ata, v'lo chashta et bincha et yichidecha. Mimeni, Vayisa Abraham et einav, vayar v'hinei ayil echad ne'echad basvach v'karno. Vayelech Abraham vayikach et ha'ayil v'yalehu le'olah tachat beno. Vayikra Abraham shem hamakom hahu Adonai yireh asher ye'amer hayom Bahar Adonai Yireh.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yeshua. Before we lift and tie the Torah, we are going to need, we have somebody, do we have any lefties by any chance? Who did the Torah, who did the lifting yesterday?
They did, but I'll do it today. Start stretching first.
So this is traditionally the time we do the Shabarach.
In the back.
Very back of the mouth floor.
And I will have it on the screen. Would you like me to read the list?
Yes, if you'd like to read the list, and then if people would like to add other names as well.
It's already there. Show me. Yeah. This week, we're particularly sending prayers of healing of body and spirit. Teresa Dorfman, Lucas Lodich, Doug Smith, Fern Geld, Ann Keller-Smith, John Goldsworthy, Suzanne Fleur, Jay Miller, Don Castile, Jody and Ellie Rosenblum, Susan Panic, Joan Levin, Betsy Keshish, Mayan Mader, David A., Esther Simcha Harav Maasha Rahab Shlomo, Joseph Hans, Justin Hans, Reverend Emma Jane Finney, Shelley Smolowitz, Reverend Lloyd Steffen, Ralph Marks, Betsy Nippon, Miguel Garcia, Jess Mahler, Star Nichols, and Robin Lakin. Anyone has any other names?
Janet Moss,
Janet Mosk,
Yaakov Ben Meir.
Yaakov Ben Meir.
Anyone else? Betsy, do you have something you want?
Janet Dragon, Charlotte Sefried, Paul Erlenborn. Michael Raymond.
Any other names that you'd like to add? May all those in need of healing of body, mind, and spirit find within themselves the strength from the divine to bring a sense of healing and wholeness into their lives. And may all those who are caregivers and all those in the healing professions find strength from the divine within them to bring healing, wholeness, care, and compassion to all those in need. Let's sing together Debbie Friedman's Mishaberah. Mekor haracha li'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mekor haracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. So before we continue, I wanted to share, there's a longer midrash that starts out with a prose piece that focusing on Sarah. Again, as I said, Sarah is left out of the Akedah story, in spite of the fact that we know from the birth story that, she was very much a part of it. And according to Midrash, because this parsha is followed, which is Vayera, my father's bar mitzvah parsha. Normally it's parsha Vayera is immediately followed by Chaye Sarah, which speaks of the death of Isaac, that the rabbis linked the Akedah with Sarah's death. So there are two different interpretations. One is that Satan, so again, in Jewish tradition, Satan is not the devil. Satan is an adversary. Satan is a troublemaker. Disguises himself and tells Sarah that Isaac has been killed. She's in mourning, and then when she sees that Isaac is actually alive, she's so overjoyed that she dies. And the other version is that she just thinks Isaac goes off with his father, and when he comes back alone, she realizes Isaac has died. That she thinks Abraham has sacrificed Isaac, and so she dies. So either way, the trauma of the Akedah is responsible in some way, shape, or form for the death of Sarah. So again, we have this idea of, and we know that trauma gets carried on generationally, not just psychologically, but genetically. But again, so here we're talking about spiritually, because whether or not this actually ever happened is a question. But still, we have the trauma that spiritually that has been carried by the Jewish people ever since. So I have this whole lead up to this, which is basically a poem that Sarah composes along the lines that we have Deborah's poem. We have the Song of the Sea, this idea of poem at a central point. So this is Sarah's poem as she, is waiting, knowing that something happened. Why did I let him go? How could I not? My son, my only one, whom I love more than life itself, is no more here with me, though I know he will always be. I could not look, I could only feel, sitting in my tent, surrounded by God's light, feeling the Shekhinah's presence, afraid I would fail the test, not know what it was, or if it was all my imagination, not knowing what it was, or if it was all in my imagination, afraid, not knowing what was happening, that I would rise up from my place, run to him, embrace him, prevent him from going with his father, from growing, living, leaving. But I did not try to stop them, later to find them. I passed the test. I held my screams, tears, fears, remaining in my tent. I allowed him to leave with his father, not knowing where they would go, knowing in my heart only one would return, knowing the only way to fulfill God's promise was to let him go into the wilderness from whence he came, trusting in God, in Abraham, trusting the voice deep in my heart, my soul, which I knew would be torn from my body the moment I knew for certain that I would never again hear his voice, never see his face, feel his touch. The moment I would come to realize that what I wished for, fought for, dreaded, has come to pass. He is no longer mine, as he should not be. Perhaps then, or is it now, he will finally become who he was meant to be, Yitzchak, a child of laughter. In this moment, I remember my laughter, disbelief when I was told I would give birth. I can hear Abraham's laughter, incredulity, joy when I gave birth. But Yitzchak's laughter, I do not remember. He was too busy watching, caring, observing, thinking, but never realizing before now, never laughing, never realizing, I am a prophet, I am a mother, how could I not see? Did he ever laugh? Yes, a distant memory arises from deep within. A memory, a shadow, a childhood long ago cut short. A memory from before that moment when I showed through my actions and speech that he was not to be like other children, that he was the only one. A moment in the days before my jealousy, fear, hatred, masquerading as love and protection, cast away his brother, the only one he loved, the one who knew what it meant to be a son of Abraham, but not of Sarah, which was all I could see. The only one who helped him to see, to feel, to know that he was not alone. Before that day when I and his father altered his life forever, I believe there was laughter. I had forgotten because I did not want to remember it was I who killed it. But now, knowing what has happened, knowing that he has gone away from us, perhaps he will again learn to laugh and not just live. Perhaps now he will begin walking the path to fulfill the promise. Create a people like stars in the sky, sands on the shore, shining brightly, possessing the faith of his father, able to shift, to change, to adapt like his mother, with the ebb and flow of constantly changing impermanence, which is life, which is a life built on hopes and dreams that never turn out exactly as we imagine, but often turn out as they were meant to be. A life that will enable him not only to lead, learn, and live, but to love, and finally again to laugh. I do not know. I can only pray that this shall be. This is what I hope, pray, wish for as I sit in my tent, feeling God's presence, never alone, waiting to discover how the story will unfold. These 3 days and nights seem an eternity of darkness, the sun never rising, or so it seemed. Suddenly in the distance I see 3 figures, 2 nameless servant boys, and a man who I don't know, and a man I know all too well. A man with whom I have shared lifetimes, so it seems, now bent over, not merely with age, but with sorrow. He too has passed the test. I see no one else, no sun to brighten my heart, my days to embrace me. But I know, for I have seen with the eye within me, that he lives. I know not where, but that is enough. There is nothing more to do, but breathe and wait for God to embrace me and return my soul breath to its source, someday to be reunited with the soul that came into this world to inhabit the one to whom I gave birth, the one who filled me with joy and laughter, the one who blessed me and who shall be a blessing to those yet to come. At that moment when our souls are united, I will be able to learn what is next to come, what now is to come next, what is to be, how he is to live, to fulfill his destiny, God's destiny. But for that moment I must wait. And that is as it must be. That is as it should be.
Rabbi,
Yes.
first of all, that was absolutely beautiful. I have a question for you, and I'm not sure whether it's in this portion or the subsequent one, which is that Abraham apparently wasn't able to afford to bury her. And I never understood, even if that were the case, what is the significance? Why was it even put in the Torah?
Well, he could afford it. Actually, he was wealthy. It was that he had to bargain for the land. He wanted it to. They wanted to donate it, but he was very clear, like, no, I want to do it the right way. I want to purchase the land. I don't want anybody to ever accuse me of stealing the land or whatever. So it's really about that, knowing that, sure, he could have taken it as a gift, but he felt very strongly that he wanted to purchase it the way it was supposed to be purchased. But we can talk about that more later. I'm just noticing the time.
Oh, no, it was a quick question. Of course.
So,
Good.
Thank you, dear.
I'm just, in terms of the building,
Oh, when do we have the building too?
Yes.
Oh, well, I'll check.
Okay, so I just realized that.
That's another app.
We're just, so we should be finished by 12:45.
Yeah, we're okay.
Somewhat
Yes.
important. We're not gonna, so, we're not gonna chant the Haftorah today, but we will have a show, because I want to make sure we have time for the shofar service without rushing through it. So we continue with the lifting of the Torah. Oh wait, no, that's actually after the Torah, it's after the shofar service. Let's turn to page 584. I want us to say a prayer for peace, because we certainly, that sort of encompasses our country, Israel, the world, that we just need peace for everywhere. So, sorry, with that, lost the page. That's Amichai's poem.
584, I think.
84.
Yeah, 583.
So let's see. I thought there was a prayer for peace in here, but I don't. Prayer for 584. That's the Amichai poem.
583.
Actually, the 584 is a prayer for peace. It's a Yehuda Amichai poem for peace, which is so I think that's a nice way that it's something a little bit different. Would somebody like to read the poem on page 584 as a prayer for peace for Israel, for our country, for everywhere in our world?
The man under his fig tree telephoned the man under his vine. Tonight, they definitely might come. Assign positions, armor plate leave, secure the tree. Tell the dead to report home immediately. The white lamb leaned over, said to the wolf, humans are bleeding and my heart weeps with grief. I'm afraid they'll get to gunpoint to bayonets in the dust. At our next meeting, this matter will be discussed. All the nations united will flow to Jerusalem to see if the Torah has gone out. And then, inasmuch as it's spring, they'll come down and pick flowers from all around. And they'll beat swords into plowshares and plowshares into swords, and so on, and so on, and back and forth. Perhaps from being beaten thinner and thinner, the iron of hatred will vanish forever.
Yehuda Amichai always had a way of just getting ready. So that is a poetic prayer for peace for our world. So we're going to move ahead to the shofar service now. On page 592. Tyler, would you do us the honor again this year?
All right.
So we'll start on page 592. Everyone please rise if you're able. So let's say the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehachiyanu v'kiyimanu v'hihyanu la'azman hazeh. Tekiah. No, that was fine. Just the phone went off at the same time. And Shabarim Teruah. Sorry. That's okay. It always takes a while with these. Sorry. I was again. Okay. Take it relax.
That's a hard one.
Tekiah. Tekiah. Shvarim Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shvarim Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shvarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shvarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shvarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah Gedolah. Go on. Yeah,
That's an arch over
yeah, it's always hard when you never, and I know, so yes, come on.
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
All right. Okay, actually remain standing, so we don't have to sit down and get up again. On page 594. Ashrei Fevitecha Lo Yehalucha Selah. Ashrei Hamshakacha Lo. Ashrei Ha'am Shadonai Elohav. Hilal David Aromimcha Elai HaMelech. Avarcha Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed. B'chol Yom Avartecha. V'halal Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed. Gadol Adonai Mu'al Le'od. V'li Gilato Ein Teker. Dor L'dor Shabbat Ma'asecha. Upurotecha Yagidu. Adar Kavod Hodecha. V'divrei Niflotecha Asila. Ve'ezuz Merotecha Yomeru. U'gdulacha Hasaprena. Sefer Raktucha Yavihu. V'tzidkacha Yiranenu. Anu Rachum Adonai. Erecha Haim Ukta Chased. Tov Adonai L'kol. Rachamav L'kol Ma'asaha. Yoducha Adonai Kol Ma'asecha. V'chasidecha Yivarchucha. Kavod Malchucha Yomeru. U'ratcha Yedaberu. L'odia L'bnei Adam Urotav. Kvod Hadar Malchuto. Malchucha Malchut Kol Olamim. U'memshalcha L'kol Dor Vador. Samech Adonai L'kol Hanoflim. Sokev L'kol HaKufim. Einei Kol Elecha Yisaberu. Ve'atem atanotem lahem et oflam be'ito. Poteach et yadecha. U'maspia L'kol Charatzon. Tzadik Adonai L'kol Drachav. V'chasid L'kol Ma'asav. Karov Adonai L'kol Kor'av. L'kol Asher Yikrahu Be'emet. Ritzon Yireah Ya'aseh. V'et Shavatan Yishma V'yoshiem. Shomer Adonai et Kol Ha'vahav. V'et Kol HaRishaim Yashmid. Tehilat Adonai Yedaber Pi. V'orech Kavasar Shem Kodsho Le'olam Va'ed. V'anachnu Nevarech Yah. Me'ata V'yad Olam. Hallelujah. No, I realize this is time to put the Torah back in the ark, but we should have actually lifted and tied it earlier, so that was my bad. So go back to page 545. who's gonna address the Torah? We have. You,
No, I've stood enough.
okay, okay, so. Amod, Hamad Pia Yamod, Hagolel. Bezot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai B'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Please remain standing. And then we go back to H9B, which is on page 606. Uvnuchol Yomar. Tov natati lahem, Torati al ta'azohu, Eitzahim hi, Lamachazim ba, V'tom cheha, Mehushar, Deracheha, Darkei Noam, V'chol Netivoteha, Shalom, Hashivenu, Adonai, Elecha B'nashuva, Adesh, Adesh Yameinu, Adesh Yameinu, Kekedem. So you may be seated. And let's continue on page 665. Or not 665, sorry. Hold on. Sorry. All right, we're going to jump ahead to 1196. Living with the second day. Actually, I'm going to keep changing the page number.
Keep roll with it. Okay.
It's the rabbi's prerogative to change their mind, right? 1201, Aleinu, please rise. Aleinu l'shameach adon hakol, latek v'dula li'otzer breshit, shenatan lanu Torah ha'temet, v'chayei olam ציפורים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ ומשה בקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגופי מרומים הוא אלוהינו עינו אמת מלכנו את בסולתו הכתוב בתורתו וידעת היום והשיבות אל לבביך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת עינות ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו We turn to page 12. You may be seated. Actually, I love the Judy Chicago poem that's in there as an alternative to the Amidah, to the Aleinu. We can read it in addition to the Aleinu. Although, it's interesting also how things have changed though since when was this published? 1999. So there was actually a conversation about this in the Reconstructionist Rabbis group the other day, because there was just a song that was made out of it, but that it's, the way it's written is very much binary, men and women, women and men. So the tradition has arisen just to say, for the lines which says both men and women, both women and men, just to say all people. So.
What page?
Page 1208. So we can read this together in this, instead of men and women or women and men, just say all people. And then all that has divided us will merge, and then compassion will be wedded to power, and then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then all people will be gentle, and then all people will be strong, and then no person will be subject to another's will. And then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life's creatures. And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again. We turn to page 16, Mourner's Cottage. Are there yard sites this week would you like to mention?
Yeah, this week we have the yard sites of Jerome Dorfman, father of Risa and Nancy Dorfman. Wendy Greenberg, member of Haskalah. Krysia Sipa Drostowicz, mother-in-law of Mary Lou Scarf. Edith Gerber Shanker, grandmother of Adrian Shanker. Ida Malik, grandmother of Helen and Lynn Malik. As a community, we're in the first year of mourning for our members, Norma Cohen and Bill Ernest. We especially comfort our members who are in their first year of mourning. Jody Rosenblum, Tamar Ernest, Maddie Langman, and Dave Smith. If anyone has any other names.
Is there anyone else that people would like to mention at this time? Keep in mind all the victims of war and violence in Ukraine, throughout the world, in our cities and towns, and that someday we'll no longer need to add victims of violence such as that to our thoughts and to our lists of names. So whoever is customary it is to rise for Kaddish, please do so, page 1216. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shmei Rabbah, Yamad, Yivrach, Yirteh, Yamlich, Machuteh, L'chaim Chon, V'yomei Chon, L'chayei, L'chol Beit Yisrael, L'Agalah, U'zman Kariv, Yimru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, Marach, Le'olam, L'mei Maya. Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitfa'ar, Yitrumam, Yitaseh, Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitalal, Shemei Kudsha, Rihu. La'ela, La'ela, Mikol, Irkata, V'shirata, Tushbachata, V'nechemata, Damiran, V'yalma, V'yimru, Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba, Min Shemaya, L'chaim Aleinu, V'yal Kol Yisrael, V'yimru, Amen. Oseh Shalom V'ramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael, V'yal Kol Yoshvei Tevel, V'yimru, Amen. May the one who makes peace on high make peace here on earth for us, for all Israel, and for all who dwell on earth. And let us say, Amen. Any announcements?
We will have an online Erev Shabbat Shuva service on Friday night. So schleppen, but we'll have that online at 7:30 p.m. our typical Erev Shabbat. And it's going to use the high holiday link, but you'll get an email, I'll tell you which link. And then for Kol Nidre, we return 6 p.m. I'm sorry, it was published at a different time earlier, but it is 6 p.m. on Kol Nidre, which is October 4th.
Yes, third Tuesday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a week from today. Just checking.
Who's leading the Shabbat Shuva service?
Alex and Jess.
Okay, so let's why don't we end on page 1222 with Hayom. We only do that this time of year. So thank you to everybody for participating, for being here. And as I said earlier, one thing I love about and value about Haskalah is our flexibility. And thank you for the conversation. Like I said, I actually did not plan on, I was planning on having a discussion later on in the service, but with that one, and so it was really, thank you everyone for participating. And I think we have a lot of good thoughts and a lot of good ideas, and just really appreciate that. So.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. My pleasure. All right, so page 1222. Hayom, 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 te'amteinu. Amen. Hayom, 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 tevarteinu. Amen. Hayom, 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 tidaleinu. Amen. Hayom, 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 tidrashenu l'tova. Amen. Hayom, 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 titzlabeinu l'chayim tovim. Amen. Hayom, 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 tishma shevatenu. Amen. Hayom, 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 tikabel b'rachamim u'b'ratzon. And wait, I always get this wrong. Hayom, hayom, let's try it again. Hayom, 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 tikabel b'rachamim u'b'ratzon et tfilateinu. Amen. Hayom, 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 titmechenu b'min tiktecha. Amen. Hayom, 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 timchol v'tislach l'chol avonoteinu. Amen. Shana Tova, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate everybody who came and online.
And thank you, Tyler, for the so
Yes.
far. I know it's always tricky when you've never.
Yeah.
That's a.
And no practice, just, that was a cold one.
I was just thinking, like, take that one home.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is a tricky one.
We'll send him home with it at the end.
Is he a professional chauffeur?
Not
Nope, nope, nope.
Playing what?
playing.
Okay.
What do you play?